Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to Hope for Your Heart. This is Pastor Calvin Corbett. So glad that you're joining us today. And we've been going through 30 beliefs that every believer should believe. And today we're looking at belief number 12, and that we are to be ones who honor God's design for the family. And so when you think about honoring God's design for the family, we are told in the Bible to honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment that's given with a promise. And the promise is that your life will go well and you live long in the land that God has given you. So I think about honoring God's design for family. One man, one woman, one lifetime. That is God's design. And obviously, that is a design that is God's perfect plan. But unfortunately, we don't live up to that perfection. But that's still God's plan. And we should honor those that God has placed into our lives who are mothers and fathers, and recognize that God uses mothers and fathers as kind of the first line of defense in protecting a culture. And so honoring mom, for example, honoring mom with prayer is a great way to honor her. You know, the word prayer or praying or pray is found 320 times in the Bible. And we look at about a praying mom. And I thank God that I have a mom that prays for me every day. Somebody said this about motherhood. Said motherhood is like a fairy tale, but in reverse. You start out in a beautiful ball with a beautiful ball gown, and you end up in stained rags cleaning up after little people. It's spicy is the universal mom code for word I don't want to share, right? And so we think about moms. Moms are such a blessing to us, so we should honor moms. We should honor dads. And we want to look at the subject of God's plan for protecting a culture, and it comes through the family that God originally designed. And so today I want to just spend just a few minutes talking about this whole matter of why should I be so concerned about where we are heading as a nation and what is happening in our culture as a nation. And I think it goes back to the family falling apart. When I think about the Supreme Court decision back in June of 2022, where they basically overturned Roe v. Wade, and we thought, well, that's going to settle the issue on abortion. But today's headlines should convince all of us that the battle is not actually over. It's actually just beginning. As a matter of fact, in Kansas, this is on Tuesday, August the 2nd, 2022, Kansas voters rejected a ballot measure that would have allowed the Republican-controlled legislature to tighten restrictions on abortion or to ban the procedure outright. And then in another state, Massachusetts, Governor Charlie Baker signed into law a measure establishing abortion as a constitutional right in that state, in the state of Massachusetts. The Justice Department is now suing Idaho over that state's abortion restrictions ban. And then President Biden signed an executive order intended to make it easier for women seeking abortion to travel between the states to obtain access to the procedure. So when the Dobbs decision was handed down in June, like so many of us, we thought the decision would hopefully end some of our battles. We noticed that the battles have just simply moved from the federal level down to the states and now even into the local areas. For example, I was reading this about Dallas and Austin, Texas, and they were seeking to protect abortion rights. However, we could not have seen this one where we have cities and towns that are actually going different than the state. For example, in Dallas, Texas unanimously approved a resolution Tuesday to protect abortion rights in the city by prohibiting the use of city funds to investigate people who actually get the procedure of abortion done. Austin has also approved similar legislation, and their legislation was called Guarding the Right to Abortion Care for Everyone. And ironically and tragically, it's known as the GRACE Act, Guarding Right to Abort Care for Everyone. So no matter what steps the state of Texas, for example, takes to regulate abortion, these cities intend to not enforce them. So once again, we see that the 1973 Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion continues to divide and polarize our country. George Will rightly noted that the ruling inflamed the issue and embittered our politics, concluding by saying, thus, did the Supreme Court diminish American democracy? Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg considered Roe v. Wade a prominent example of the fact that doctrinal limbs too swiftly shape the experience may prove unstable. So as we look at this, we have a major moral chasm, I guess you could say, here in our world today, here in the United States. But let's spend a few minutes talking about God's original intent when it comes to matters of family, honoring the institution of family, and why we feel that it's so important, okay? So let's look at the book of Proverbs by way of getting started. As we look at the book of Proverbs, we talk about what a godly woman looks like, a truly godly woman. And I want to go ahead and read Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31. And then I'll give you some stats about marriage, and then we'll talk about why we should honor those who are in authority over us, especially mom and dad, okay? So Proverbs 31, beginning at verse number 10. If you can find a truly good wife, she is worth more than precious gems. Her husband can trust her, and she will richly satisfy his needs. She will no longer hinder him, but help him all her life. She finds wool and flax, and she busily spins it. She buys imported foods brought to her by a ship from distant ports. She gets up before dawn, and she prepares breakfast for her household, and she plans the day's work for her servant girls. She goes out to inspect the field, and then she buys it, and with her own hands, she plants a vineyard. She's energetic, she's a hard worker, and she watches for bargains. She works far into the night. She sows for the poor and generously helps those in need. She has no fear of winter for her household, for she has made warm clothes for all of them. She also upholsters with fine tapestry. Her own clothes are beautifully made, a purple gown of pure linen. Her husband is well known, for he sits in the council chamber with the other civic leaders. She makes belted linen garments to sell to the merchants. She's a woman of strength and dignity and has no fear of old age. When she speaks, her words are wise, and kindness is the rule for everything she says. She watches carefully all that goes on throughout her household, and she's never lazy. Her children stand and bless her. So does her husband. He praises her with these words: "There are many fine women in the world, but you are the best of them all." Charm can be deceptive, and beauty doesn't last, but a woman who fears and reverences God shall be greatly praised. Praise her for the many fine things she does. These good deeds of her shall bring her honor and recognition from people of prominence. Wow, what a powerful passage talking about the Proverbs 31 woman. Well, let's look at some of the stats that we are looking at today in regards to marriage and parenting. Now, this was from the Pew Research, and a survey on marriage and parenting found that 41% of American adults said children are very good for a marriage. Very important to have a good marriage. You have to have children. Now, this represents a very sharp decline from 65% in 1990. So as we look at this stat, we discover that the value of children is being diminished within a good marriage. And when we think about a good marriage, to me, children are part of a good marriage. As we think about honoring mom, 3 prayers to honor mom would be that we could honor her worth so that she'd be able to laugh at the days to come, so that she would receive the honor that is due to her. Abraham Lincoln said, "I remember my mother's prayers, and they have always followed me. They have clung to me all my life." The Spanish proverb says this about a mother's prayer: "An ounce of a mother's prayer is worth a ton of a priest's prayer." George Washington said, "Everything that I have, all that I have, I owe to my mother." Jill Churchill said, "There's no way to be a perfect mother. There's a million ways to be a good one." And then Princess Diana said, "A mother's arms are more comforting than anybody else's." Well, I want you to understand that God has placed fathers and mothers into our lives with a very profound purpose, and we should honor them because of their worth. A woman or a wife of noble character, who can find her, says Solomon? She is worth far more than rubies. When you think about the worth of a mother, you can't put a price tag on all that she does. There was a young doctor who was working in a New York City hospital, and she was friends with a doctor who was a few years ahead of her And this doctor, who was a few years ahead of her, was pregnant with her second child. The older doctor said to her friend one day, "Do you know what I love most about being pregnant? It's the only time where I feel productive all the time. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm doing something." It struck the young medical doctor that her friend based her self-regard so completely on productivity that she seemed relieved to finally find a task that she could do incessantly. She reflected, for many of us, being productive and doing becomes an attempt at redemption. That is, through our work, we try to build our worth, our security, and our meaning. Many people are trying to get a sense of self-worth through their productivity and through their success, but that burns them out. You see, character is not what you do. Character is who you are. So Solomon says, a wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a wife who causes shame is like rottenness to his bones. One of my favorite Bible stories is the story of Ruth. The story of Ruth, where Boaz says to her, "All of the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character." He has already explained a little earlier in this story why she has this reputation. He said, "I've been told about you and all that you did for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland, and you came to live with a people that you did not know before." It seems to me that Ruth is considered a woman of noble character, literally a woman of valor, because she honored the obligations that she had in her relationship with Naomi. You see, it was a great cost and of great danger to her, but she worked hard to ensure that her mother-in-law would be provided for. You see, honor has the mindset of one who protects, one who provides. You see, as you think about the mother in your life and the father in your life, realize that they have a lot of worth. And as we praise them and as we honor them, they sense that they are now having a whole lot of self-worth. The second way that we see that we can praise or we can pray for the ones that God has brought into our lives, our mothers specifically, is found in verse 25. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. You know, I think about that verse in Proverbs that it says, "A glad heart makes a cheerful face, but by sorrow of heart, the spirit is crushed." You know, we're living in a day and age where it seems like everything that we look on social media, Facebook, on Snapchat, Instagram, and all other media sites, they have begun doing something that is really kind of appalling. They have these high-tech filters. With just a few simple clicks, these filters will make you look much better than you really are. These filters have exploded in popularity as millions of users now get these model looks by sharpening, by shrinking, by enhancing, by recoloring their faces and their bodies. Researchers actually have come up with a name what these high-tech filters do. It's called augmented reality, AR for short, and they're concerned that girls are subject in an experiment that will show how the technology changes the way that we form our identities, the way we represent ourselves, or even the way that we relate to others. And it's all happening without much oversight. Both Facebook and Instagram claim that over 600 million people have used these beautifiers. Facebook reports that about 10,000 employees are working on AR and virtual reality products right now. More than 400,000 third-party creators have produced a total of 1.2 million effects on Facebook alone. Girls say an Instagram face is a face that has a small nose, big eyes, clear skin, and big lips. Researchers are concerned that many young girls express an interest in real-life plastic surgery so that it can obtain a similar look to their online image. One specialist on eating disorders said she can see that anxiety is developing in girls that live with this image of how they're living online, but they can never live up to it in their in-person selves. I want you to know, the beauty that you have is not just the outward face. It's the character within. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. That cheerful face is something that cannot be filtered with a high-tech filter. It comes from what's in our hearts. Proverbs reminds us that when our heart is sorrowful, it affects our face. I want us to be able to laugh at the days to come. I'm so thankful I had a mom that realized that outward beauty was secondary to inward beauty. The development of a person's character was foremost. Susanna Wesley was the mother of John and Charles Wesley. These two guys were the founders of the Methodist Church and the Holiness movement. Susanna Wesley had a hard life. She was married to a man who was much older than her. He was a preacher, and he never made very much money, and what little money that he was able to earn, he had a hard time managing it. As a matter of fact, he actually ended up one time in debtor's prison. So what did Susanna Wesley do? She decided to divorce him and leave him high and dry. No, that's not what she decided to do. That's what most people do in our day and age. What did Susanna Wesley do? She rose to the occasion. She did what her well-meaning but slightly incompetent husband couldn't do sometimes. She found ways to provide for the family. She trained her children how to be successful, how to be responsible, how to budget money. When she was sick, she delegated the responsibilities to her children so that the household could continue to operate. She even taught Bible stories at the church that actually drew more listeners than her husband's sermons. John Wesley said this about his mom: "I learned more about Christianity from my mother than from all the theologians in England." When I think about a godly mom and a godly dad, what a blessing they are to their family. We have been given an opportunity to laugh at the days to come because we realize that God is the God who is in control of our circumstances. We can have strength and dignity. We can laugh at the days to come because we are trusting God even in the midst of the most difficult times. There's something else that we think about when it comes to this matter of honoring those who deserve our honor. In Numbers chapter 6, it says that the Lord, and this is a high priestly prayer that Moses offered to the priest. He says, "May the Lord bless you, and may the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and to be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace." When I think about giving honor to our mothers and fathers, in Proverbs 31:28, it says that her children arise and call her blessed. You know, when I think about that blessedness, I think about young Timothy and how Paul reminded young Timothy of the genuine faith that resided in him. Paul was very specific. He says that faith first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and then in your mother Eunice. And Paul says, you know what? I'm persuaded that it's in you also. And then he reminds Timothy to stir up that gift that God had by the laying on of hands. And he reminds Timothy that that blessed gift that was given to him, passed on 2 generations before him, should be passed on to others. Today, we live in a day and age where it seems like we don't honor those who make children their top priority. You know, if a stay-at-home mom earned an annual salary for all the jobs that she performed on a daily basis, how much do you think that she would earn? Well, I found an annual mom salary survey was done, and it was released just in time for Mother's Day. They actually surveyed 1,900 moms since the start of the pandemic and estimated the value of mom's work by tracking it in real-time market prices of all the jobs that moms perform. Here's the result. The median salary for a stay-at-home mom in the past year was $184,820, rising $6,000 more from pre-pandemic median. As we look at these premiums, it's like, can you imagine paying all this to have your wife stay home with your children? If you factor in the pay premiums that companies offers, like bonuses for overtime and hazard pay duties, and then the increase in the intensity of work this past year, a stay-at-home mom could earn more than $200,000 annually. I think we can all agree that they are worth every single penny. And so let's not forget even the working moms out there, because many moms today have no choice, but they must work outside the home. Well, the data shows that they are spending, on average, 54 hours per week managing things on the home front, in addition to the hours they put in at their job outside of the home. So when you add all that up, they're spending a total of 107 hours each week, split between work and home. Now, we all know that moms are the ultimate multitaskers, juggling lots of different responsibilities all day, every day, but it wouldn't really sink in until you see that full list. This year's study of consideration of the traditional roles like housekeeping and dietitian and facilities director and newer roles like network administrator and the whole social media communicator, in the end, the mom role includes more than 20 different positions. The reason I bring all this up is because I think about where our culture is today and not recognizing and honoring God's design for the family. I am so thankful that I was raised, I guess, in a very traditional home where my mom stayed home and took care of us 7 children. There were 7 of us kids, and she was industrious. It wasn't that she didn't work, and so she wanted to be home with us, and so she actually opened up a daycare business right there in the home. And she never advertised, but she always had more children than she could possibly take care of. And she maintained a waiting list of parents who wanted her to take care of their children as well. And I remember many days coming home from school and entering in a house that was filled with laughter, filled with joy, children everywhere. And my mom's patience and her love and her long suffering in dealing in that situation. When I think about all that a mom goes through, it just is amazing to me that we don't honor what God has put them in that position to do. We also don't recognize the fact that God has brought fathers into our lives as well. When I think about the protection that is given to us as a culture, the family protects us. In the closing moments that I have in the broadcast, I want to look at the overview of how God brings about protection into a culture. As we look at the book of Hebrews, for example, there are some dangers that we must avoid as followers of Christ. Number one danger would be the danger of drifting. We're told that we must pay careful attention to what we have heard so that we don't drift away. The message that God has given us through His Word is that God loves the family. It was His first creation. God created 3 institutions. Number one, He created the human family, and that was started with Adam and Eve. And I want to give some hope to you who are parents listening to me today. Maybe your children haven't turned out exactly how you were hoping they would have turned out. I want you to know that God had one son, Adam, one daughter, Eve, that He created. Adam and Eve were married. And this first couple, they brought sin into the world. This first couple was filled with rebellion, and God gave them only one test. They could not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they failed that test. And this couple that was in a perfect environment sinned and made a wrong choice. Not only did they make a wrong choice, but this couple also brought into the world the first murderer. Yeah, that's right. Cain killed Abel. Well, what a tragedy, right? What a heartbreak. I say all that to bring hope to you as a parent. If your children turn out okay, well, thank the Lord for that. You probably didn't have as much to do with it as you think you did. If your children make very poor choices in their lives, you probably didn't have a whole lot to do with that either. I find all of us are doing the best we can to raise our children and to nurture the admonition of the Lord. I want to challenge you to honor those that God has placed in the position of the family. The second institution that God created was human government. The purpose of government is to protect us from evil and to reward those who do good, to punish evil and to reward good. And then the third institution that God raised up is the church. I'm so glad to be actively involved in the church because the Bible reminds us that the church is to be the salt and the church is to be bringing the light into the world. Salt preserves a culture. Light gives direction. As we think about the opportunities that God has given us, let's share the gospel wherever we may go. In the closing seconds of the broadcast, I want to pray. And I want to pray for those who are mothers and fathers today, that they won't be weary in their well-doing. So Lord, I pray a hedge of protection around the moms and dads listening to me today, that you will build them up in their faith, that you will protect them from the forces of evil. And we pray this believing in Jesus' name. Amen. If you'd like to hear this broadcast again, you can have a free download at buzzsprout.com/1890557, or you can listen on Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast.
Hickory Ridge Community Church is located at 3320 Battlefield Boulevard South in Chesapeake, Virginia. Sunday service times are 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. We'd love for you to join us. For more information, go to hrcc7.org. And remember, no matter what you're going through, in Jesus Christ there is always hope for your heart.